A gut-wrenching podcast that unravels the dark story of a love triangle turned deadly, involving a dog trainer, a wealthy heiress, and a bodyguard. The 6-episode, 48-hour podcast titled Trained to Kill dives into the mystery surrounding the disappearance of Mark Stover and the investigation that led to many unanswered questions. WBZ's Breana Pitts spoke with 48 Hours correspondent Peter Van Sant to learn more about who was the hunter and who was the hunted.
Peter, this story is really interesting. I did some reading about it. So this is this dark love triangle. You have a wealthy heiress, the dog trainer, and then the security expert. It truly does kind of sound like a movie in some ways. So if you can, tell me a little bit more about these three people and kind of how this turned into a dark love triangle.
This all begins with Mark Stover. He was the dog trainer to the stars in the Pacific Northwest. They called him the dog whisperer of the Pacific Northwest. He had Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam as a client, lots of celebrities, wealthy people in the state of Washington. One day, a woman, a very statuesque, 6-foot-tall, blonde, beautiful woman named Linda Updike comes into his business. She has a dog that she'd like to have trained. The two of them hit it off. Eventually, they start a professional life together. They start a dog training business that becomes $1 million a year business. And then they eventually get married. But Linda Updike says not long after they got married that Mark Stover, she saw a very dark side of him. She decides that she wants to end this marriage, and that's when the obsession, that's when the hatred, that's when stalking and harassment begins. According to Linda, she had to move to Eastern Washington, and Mark followed her and would come onto her property. She'd see him on these night vision security cameras. He snuck into her house, excuse me, one night and appeared at the side of her bed, just terrifying her, put a gun to her head. So she hires a man named Michael Oakes, a security expert and firearms expert, to protect her and turn her home into a fortress. And they fall in love. Now you've got this love triangle between the heiress, the dog trainer, and the bodyguard. And then one day, Mark Stover in 2009, an employee goes into his house, sees blood, smells bleach. Stover can't be found. His own dog has been shot 3 times in the head and survived. Cops come over, they realize they have a murder on their hands, and the story takes off from there.
It really, I feel like the common thread, and I'm curious if you agree in doing these stories, because you spoke to Linda, and there is always red flags, right? And a lot of the times when we're in relationships, we can kind of ignore some red flags early on in the beginning. And it's in hindsight that it sounds like she realized, like, wait, there was a lot of things there that were off.
Absolutely. After they got married, and they'd been together for 11 years before they got married, and all of a sudden now they're sharing the books and all that and the money, he became absolutely controlling with her. If she wanted to buy an avocado or a tomato, he would shout at her about, "We don't need this." He became overbearing for her. And she also saw a dark side. He had a very troubled childhood. His father died when he was 18 years old, and he had grown up in poverty. He had an anger problem. People would come onto their property where they had the dogs. Mark would confront with a pistol. And so she just finally said enough is enough. And when she tried to leave him, this was one of those, "You will not leave me." And he stalked her and harassed her. And it was really terrifying. And there's audio of Mark that we have when he's saying, "This is war. This is war. I know how to deal with situations like this. And I know how to do it." He was a big hunter. So she was terrified.
These are such cautionary tales, and I hope that someone listening somewhere, if they're kind of in a bad relationship or experiencing things, can kind of listen to this and almost, you don't want them to relate in a way, but maybe someone somewhere will take something away from it because it's way more common than we think. The conclusion, how all of this ends, no one could have predicted it, and I know we can't give it all away, but just kind of thoughts on the ending.
Well, keep in mind, what Michael Oakes, this firearms expert, he claims that he went to meet Mark Stover at his home to discuss this obsession that Stover had, that he wanted their Linda's wedding photos from their wedding together. It sounds convoluted, but it became his obsession. But he goes to this meeting, Michael Oakes, and he's wearing a bulletproof vest because he's just worried. He claims he went into the house. Stover turns around, fires a single shot into his vest. He takes the gun away from him, shoots him in self-defense, kills him, panics, says he went and disposed of the body and things, and then drove to see his ex-wife who lived about 30 miles away. Um, it's a convoluted story. The body has never been found. And it's believed that he claimed to have dumped it in this body of water, which I'm very familiar with. This is an area that I grew up in. That's very shallow. There was no body there, and the belief is that he probably dumped it as he went back over the mountains to see Linda Updike after the killing. There's so many questions that still exist to this day on this case. When the employee was there, she thought she saw Mark Stover, the dog trainer, loading up his car in the distance on the property because he had his trademark broad hat on. Well, that car goes flashing by her, and it turned out the person driving that car was Michael Oakes. Well, how would Michael Oakes have known to wear that hat if Linda Updike, the heiress, didn't tell him about that hat? It's a question that I press her on in the course of this. She's never been charged with anything, but the lead detective in the case still believes that Linda knows far more than what she's saying.
Oh my goodness. And you said this is an area that you're from. What was that like for you to cover this story in a place where, you're familiar with and have ties to?
Yeah, my best friend's 10 miles from where this murder occurred. He's the one who called me about it and how I got on the case. Anacortes, Washington, I've been going there since I was a little boy in the 1950s. It's the gateway to the San Juan Islands of Washington State, a beautiful place that my family, they were homesteaders on one of the islands there back in the 1800s. So this is an area that I knew deeply, and I care so deeply about this story, about that community, and trying to find justice. And it is a stem winder of a story. It involves everything: envy and jealousy and hatred and obsession. And I got to interview Linda Updike before she was even interviewed by authorities. I got to Michael Oakes before he even testified at trial. And these are interviews that I'm very proud of, very pointed questions. And finally, we can give it the length and the detail that it deserves in this podcast. And it's quite a ride.
Well, incredible reporting. I cannot wait to get through the whole thing. Peter, thank you so much. Train to Kill is available wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.